All right, sorry about that, guys. I had an issue with my computer. It's telling me my storage was full, so I had to delete a few things. But let's get back into it.
Down everything he built, and now having the gall to go after his grieving widow and his children, indirectly threatening their livelihoods, what Charlie built. It's a bridge too far. She's said many things that were increasingly, let's just call it, unhinged. And then finally one day she said, pull your donations from this godforsaken organization, with a direct implication in her post saying that Charlie Kirk was betrayed by Turning Point USA, even saying in one clip that his friends would have had to have signed off on his murder. It seems like there is no depth too deep and no bridge too far for her to benefit her career and her show. She would even go after those who loved Charlie the most. And I have no problem with people questioning the official government narrative or what the FBI thinks, but claiming there's Egyptian planes flying around in Utah time, which he was incorrect about, claiming that these planes are landing at airports or black SUVs are pulling into federal buildings where it just so happens her lawyers also work, it has just come to the realm of nonsense. The U.S. military, she claims, is now involved in his murder. She has turned the very tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, and she has turned this political movement into a reality drama, true crime show where she treats us all like characters in a fictional show. And, I think it's just gone too far.
I'm due to have her on next week on Uncensored. I've interviewed her numerous times over the years and, get on with her perfectly well. But I had a big set to with her about the Brigitte Macron thing, where I genuinely felt that she just completely concocted this whole narrative that Brigitte Macron was a man, and then built a whole kind of conspiracy theory story around it, and was doing it purely for attention, clicks, and money. And it ended up with us having a $300,000 bet to charity. My bet being that Brigitte Macron, who mothered 3 children, is a woman. But even if it's proven, and because of course the Macrons are now suing her, even if they win, it seems to me that Candace has got herself into a place now with her surging following, that even if the Macrons win the case and they prove that Brigitte Macron is a woman, which she is, Candace will just claim another conspiracy theory. She'll probably say it wasn't Brigitte Macron who took the sex test or whatever it is they do to establish the truth, and so on. In other words, there's almost no way to turn these taps off, right? If you're intent on monetizing conspiracy theories, particularly if you have concocted them, and I'm going to ask her directly on our next interview, are you just making this stuff up, right? Because that's what many people think. It's very hard to see how you stop it in the modern world.
I completely agree. And, as you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, the shooting that took place at my property, and this is not to shift on to me, but this makes a good example of what her audience is looking for. And
what happened? So just explain to people who don't know what happened to you.
So it was late Friday into Saturday morning. So this is between midnight and 1 a.m. A vehicle slowly approached our property here at Timcast and opened fire. It appears to have been driving just below this, relatively low below the speed limit. It slowly comes in line with one of our buildings, fires a shot, speeds up, lines itself up with our studio, fires 2 more shots. This took place between midnight and 1 a.m. Saturday morning. Our security company, our security guards immediately registered them as gunshots, called the local sheriff, the police. They came out, cleared the incident, took a report, and left. I learned about this at the time, but not entirely clear what had exactly happened. The next day, we reviewed security footage, and oh yeah, this vehicle pulled up, it fired these shots. We're pretty flustered. We're actually going to be leaving this location because even with security, a fence, a perimeter, these things are getting out of hand. Now, this happened, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. People are saying that he was lying about there being a shooting, there not actually being a police report. Like, there's really no reason to lie about that. I don't know why people were trying to say he would lie about something like that. Like, doesn't make sense.
Following this, Candace has been apparently accusing me of fabricating the whole thing. And a man on the internet, some random guy calls the wrong police department who says, we have no idea what you're talking about. It then goes viral among these people who follow Candace that the police said no such event happened and they have no idea what Tim Pool is talking about. And they say that proves it. However, journalist Cameron Higby then contacted the correct department who said, yes, we have this police report on file. This happened. We came out, we cleared, etc. And then they said, Cam is now lying. So even when he shows the phone call where they say, yup, this actually happened, they say he's lying. Now we have TMZ confirming the police report in question, and they're still saying I'm lying. So a random guy calling the wrong police department proves I lied, and an actual statement from the police saying, yes, I filed this, our security company filed this report, and another journalist verifying it, 2 journalists, 3 actually, that's never enough for them. So we did, for on the uncensored portion of the show last night, play some of the audio of the shooting. But the reason we can't release the footage is that it shows the layout of our property, the location of our security implementations,
Yeah, that makes sense what he's doing. Like, people are saying release the footage so he can actually show the shots. Bro, like, I don't want people knowing the layout of my house. Like, I don't know. People just really don't think. They really just care about themselves and not really about other people. So, yeah.
Personnel, and that would compromise our already compromised security. So what I've said is perhaps once we are officially out of here, which may be in about a week or so, then upon reviewing it with security, we will release that footage. But we have already released audio for those. Her audience doesn't care. They want to believe the drama reality that Israel is paying everybody, that I'm secretly funded by insert random deep state organization, because we are characters in a drama she is producing, a reality TV show, a whodunit, and stay tuned for the next episode to see what comes next.
I mean, I don't listen until I talk to her myself. I'll hold my fire about the credibility of any of the stuff she's coming out with at the moment. I certainly have no reason to disbelieve you. I messaged you on X when I read what had happened, because I thought it was appalling, particularly appalling in light of what happened to Charlie Kirk. You know, if this carries on, if public figures in this space of talking about politics and issues in the news and so on become legitimate targets in people's eyes for assassination, then it's hard to think of a worse suppression of free speech and democratic society. What do you think is happening here?
I think people are being driven insane by the internet. I think that, you know, if you take a look at YouTube, the question is, why has YouTube announced they were banning flat earthers, not necessarily banning, but they were going to suppress this kind of conspiracy content that claims there's an ice wall surrounding the inner continents or whatever. There's a flat earth. They're going to suppress climate denial and all of these things. And there's a question over where that line of free speech is and when you should be allowed to talk about conspiracies. But they banned Alex Jones, they banned Nick Fuentes, and one could make the argument that these individuals may have been more hateful, and that was why. The question becomes, why is Candace Owens, with all of her theories on the front page, propped up, promoted to many individuals, despite her saying things like, she's not a flat earther?
She's on the front page because she's getting tons of live viewers. Every time she goes on, she's getting like hundreds of thousands of people watching her live. That's why she's in the front page. It's not a conspiracy. That's literally why. Maybe you can have a problem with what the information she's conveying, yes, but like trying to find a conspiracy of why she's getting so many views when it says right below it, it says 100,000 people currently watching. That's why she's on the front page.
Around Earther, she's left the cult of science, saying things like Bridget McCrone is a man. These things are outlandish, but for
possibly
reason YouTube and many other platforms seem to be completely okay with what she's doing.
Let me say allegedly.
Okay with what others are doing. This, I think, it's bringing people to a state of paranoid delusions. We had a show on my Culture War podcast with some psychologists and psychiatrists, and I asked them, we understand that there could be mental illnesses, that someone's brain is not firing properly, and thus they're going to believe things or see things that aren't there. But what do you call it when someone comes to believe a false version of reality because they were convinced of it by writings, literature, movies, or otherwise? And they said that's just still paranoid delusions. There are now people that believe The French legionnaires, the French Foreign Legion, Israel, and the U.S. military have a hit squad out, and they're going to take out prominent personalities, and it's just become a paranoid, delusional state. Egyptian planes around every corner. This is driving people to a state of violence. And it's not just this.
I agree with what he's saying. The likelihood of that being a real thing is almost zero, but it's not zero. But I really don't want to make like a insignificant argument or a statistically insignificant argument for why it could be real. I mean, obviously anything could happen, so it could be real, but it probably isn't real. Yeah.
There's the general political disagreement and hyperpolarization, but this is a very serious component of it. I don't know if there's an answer. I'm not saying anyone should be censored or banned. I think the answer is sunlight is the best disinfectant, and more people are coming out and criticizing the absurdities of what Candace O has been saying, and I think that actually may end up being the best disinfectant.
Tim, you said on your podcast, Timcast, that the attacks on you, actual shooting that occurred, that because of the extra security costs you're having to take on just to protect yourself and your family and your employees, that this could end your business.
So I didn't say that it would end the full business outright. We have several shows. We have other shows that are not hosted by myself. The issue is that to host a show where we bring people in every day, we give it our address 4 or 5 times to various assistants and people, makes it relatively easy for people to figure out where we are. And then you have the general security costs of keeping bad people out. We've had run-ins with creepos, we've had stalkers. A man approached the property once saying he was sent by God to speak to me. And we have to pay men to come out here with guns and make sure these people don't get in. Now we have extra added costs following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which means as a normal media business, we have advertisements, we have sponsors, we have paying members, and we do very, very well, even with our general security costs. Now we have to reassess, can we do the show here if they're opening fire on us? How do we secure against things like drive-by shootings? And there's actually no way you can unless you restructure where you're doing work out of. One recommendation was a penthouse in, say, somewhere in Florida or something like that, because then no one can get in there, no one can actually shoot at you. The issue now is, following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the credible death threats that we have received, we are looking at a new artificial cost to do business, and that is high-profile security at our location. This can cost upwards of $2 to $6 million per year, depending on how extensive. I mean, I believe you already know this. I imagine you deal with it similarly. And it was reported that Barry Weiss has to spend, $10,000 per day for her bodyguards. As a media business, it's totally fine. We can handle the costs of cameras and staff and doing the show, and we all do fairly well. But now you add on the need for 24/7 bodyguards and multiple bodyguards, and that's money we don't have. So this means that Timcast IRL, our nightly show with guests who physically enter the property, we may have to reassess and restructure. That could mean we can't afford to do business this way. My family can't afford this. And especially with the increase in political violence going into a midterm year, we have to reassess the most appropriate way for me to do shows, which means maybe I go into more of a solo slot like I do in my mornings, and we don't do shows that are physical. That's a possibility. We're also having...
Bro, all he has to do is, he just has to move to a secure spot, maybe a penthouse, I don't know, a fucking gated community, and he can just bring in people to do the same thing he's doing now. Maybe his he won't have as many employees, but he only needs a few people to actually run his podcast that he does IRL. It's not that serious.
Meetings with our partners to figure out a way to, we're looking at economies of scale. Where can we bring in all the personnel to a single location so the cost of security is spread out among 10 people instead of one person, and then we can continue to work. So hopefully it doesn't come to any immediate termination or suspension of Timcast IRL, but that may be the case. We can't handle death threats that turn into physical manifestations, actual shots fired at our property.
No, it's horrific. Absolutely horrific, and it shouldn't be happening. And like you say, this has real-time consequences for people. in terms of protection and security and all the rest of it. And for, not just for you, for your guests, everybody involved. It's outrageous. And for people to trivialize that or doubt it or whatever it may be, just compounds the problem, right? And it just fuels what I think is an increasingly big problem in America of just deliberate disinformation that's being spewed out for money.
I would encourage doubt of all people, of me or of anybody else. The issue is it's not actually doubt. It is zealotry.
Right.
I mean, Andy No, great journalist, got a press release from the sheriff department where they confirmed that our security called in the reports of shots fired, that a gray sedan had been circling the property. In all fairness, they said that we didn't turn over surveillance footage, so they couldn't substantiate the claims, but the report did happen. We played the audio on our show last night. We don't want to release the footage because it compromises the location of our cameras, security personnel. It shows the layout of the property, which would dramatically worsen an already bad situation. But it's not about doubt. It's about there's no amount of evidence that they are willing to accept because it is cult-like zealotry among people who don't want to believe this is reality.
Tim, I just want to ask you, just before I let you go, just because you've had an experience with this, I just interviewed Nick Fuentes and it blew up massively online. I'm not going to ask you about the interview. I just want to ask you one question, because you interviewed him with Ye, and they walked out and so on. This debate about whether you should platform, whether I should platform people like Fuentes, what do you think about that?
Yes. You should platform people you disagree with, people that are controversial. Let the audience form their own opinion whether or not they want to listen to somebody or they like their ideas. It's that simple.
You know, we had Milo Yiannopoulos on, which generated quite a bit of controversy, and I had people criticizing me for hosting him. I think it's sunlight being the best disinfectant. We have to be robust and prepare in our ideas and be prepared for these debates. I actually think you did it is good work that you've done in hosting Nick Fuentes. I think people should interview and challenge him. And I know that you're facing, I don't know what the right word is for it, but people are certainly coming after you now in a negative way because you were willing to do so. I think Steven Crowder did a good job. If you want to interview Candace, Tucker, Milo, Nick, anybody, I think it's appropriate, and this is what we should be doing with these debates and conversations. So I applaud you for doing so.
So, Paul, good to talk to you, and it's very sobering what's been happening to you, and I hope they get to the bottom of who was doing it, and I hope that your business continues to thrive, because you're an important voice out there, and I thoroughly enjoy listening to you, so thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We're going to react to Milo Yiannopoulos next, so check out the next one.